I wonder what you are going to do.
I'll go.
I want to go. Count on me.
Me too.
I'm ready. I'm not going to stay home.
Alright there, welcome to this video. This is going to be interesting. Over 20 years ago I was an art student. I'd done an ordinary national diploma in illustration, then I moved on to fine art foundation, then I'd done a Bachelor of Arts degree in contemporary music and art. Excuse me. And then I went on to do a master's degree in cultural studies. Cultural studies was an intellectual project where they were looking at bringing together all those different practices like sociology, history, anthropology, philosophy, etc., and bring them all in. The idea being that when you've got the division of labour, the division of intellectual labour, where all these things are studied in separation, you can't actually get a true grasp of the object in question. It's a Marxist plan. It's a Marxist idea, and they weren't shy about letting you know that. You know, they were very happy that I can remember the tutors would sort of smugly laugh that state funding was going into this blatantly Marxist project. And without doubt, I was totally seduced by the whole thing, and thought it made sense. You know, I remember and it kind of does as a method of analysis. One of the tutors told us a story about an engine. If you wanna learn how an engine works, you've got to look at an engine. There's no point studying the alternator. There's no point studying the carburetor. You've got to look at the whole thing. You know, understand it as a whole. And cultural studies is an attempt to do that. It's kind of like historical materialism. Let's take a cultural object such as a soap opera or something, and from that we can read of the era it was produced. We can look at the modes of production and the modes of consumption, and understand how that related to the economy, to social, political, all sorts of public and private institutions, excuse me, etc., and we can read an object to understand the environment that produced it. You know, this is heavy on means of production, means of consumption. You know, I've said before, it was a communist boot camp, and I lapped it up. I was quite happy with that. It seemed to make sense. You know, what they do, and this is what I've found, underpins social justice. And without doubt, cultural studies 20 years ago was the precursor to what we now call social justice. And certainly social justice courses, you know, women's studies, race and ethnic studies, all those studies come from cultural studies. And what underpins them, and what they do is they'll tell you how they'll look at the failings of capitalism, of which there are many. It's not perfect, of course it's not. It's dealing with humanity. It's the economic structure that binds humanity, and that's never going to be perfect. But rather than focus on that aspect, they look. It's just failed. We need we need something else. We need a replacement. We need a transgression of capitalism. I was arguing with a girl the other night. Oh, on my date in Manchester, one of her friends, and you know, she was just telling me how bad the world is. She was going, "The world's fucked," and I said, "Well, what's fucked about it?" And she was like, "Oh my God! I mean, have you looked? Have you had a look around?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's not perfect, but what's the problem? I mean, is it worse than it was 100 years ago or 100 years before that?" You know, the idea is that capitalism has failed. Rather than viewing things that humans are complicated, life is brutal, competition exists, it's harsh out there. No, they have this idea that life should be a bed of roses. You know, it should be a utopia, a communist utopia. Now, one of the things I realised very early on in my time studying, and I use that term loosely, I mean, you could get away with doing next to nothing. Studying art itself was incredible. You know, you could do nothing for 6 weeks and have to do a piece of work, and I'd just throw a lot of flour on my head, kick a metal bucket, and read bits of my mum's diary, and you know, they'd seriously sit around afterwards discussing that piece of work that the taxpayer was paying for. But on cultural studies, you could, some of the things that were the dissertation, my final dissertation, which passed, by the way, I got my master's degree. I done a cut and paste. So there's a book by Jacques Derrida called Glass, which is already a cut up. And I cut that up, and I cut up Walter Benjamin's Storyteller, and I just stuck them all together, cut and paste, and moved them around. I mean, you couldn't read it. It was almost impossible to read. It was a collage. And as much as in another context I could defend what I was trying to say, at the same time, you certainly don't feel like you're perhaps someone studying human biology or thermodynamics. There's not a sense of rigor. One girl done her final dissertation on in Motown, the way black singers go ooh 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 la la la, yeah, and trace that sense of repetition in vocal music back to ding, slavery. My girlfriend at the time, her dissertation was a fictional piece of her walking around the graveyards of Paris with theorist Julia Kristeva. Yeah. Anyway, I can remember being in what do they call them, when you're all sitting around chatting and talking about what projects we're going to do and that. And I noticed very early on something exceptionally suspicious about cultural studies. I remember there was this one bloke, he was into clubbing. This was like early to mid 90s. He was into clubbing, and it'd get to him, and we're all going around saying what we're working on, and he was like, yeah, what I'm looking at in my paper is the relationship to the dance space, the body and space in dance, and how lighting, the voice and the body interact to create a sweaty upheaval of truth. That wasn't exactly, and in fact, I can't improvise as bad as he was talking. And I was just looking at him thinking, hang on, you're into clubbing and you're just doing something about clubbing. Alone, not necessarily a problem, but there's more to this. And then it got to the next bloke, he was a skater. And it had consumed his identity, much like clubs had consumed the other bloke. And he said, my paper is going to be on street skating and the rites of passage of young men as they suddenly realise the street is a terrain of resistance. How an arm rail becomes a site of transgression and speed and politics. And then it got on to this girl, and she started explaining something that she was into that had consumed her identity. And I stopped them in this class. I said, look, is there not an element here that people are just writing about stuff they're into? And again, on its own, that's not alone a problem. I mean, you're going to be more motivated to discuss things you're interested in. But the item, the object, is meant to be speaking about its environment. What has created it, what has caused it, where it's going, how does this define us? How does this describe a time and a place, a socio-political existence? Whereas more often than not, it would just be someone saying, I like skateboarding, it's good. Anyway, my university, Leeds, they brought out a book. I don't think like a regular, it's like sort of like a, I think it come out every 3 months, called Parallax. Yeah. And there was this real like snobby little clique of people that got involved with that, the teachers' pets really. And they churned out this magazine, and it's kind of esoteric to say the least. I can't imagine who would read it. I can't imagine the people who even contributed to it would read anyone else's stuff. It'd just be like, look, I'm in Parallax. Yeah, it's still going. Parallax is still going. The good old taxpayers' buck is still being spent on this stuff. And I googled it and I found it, and they're doing a call for papers. I might even put one together under a pseudonym. They wouldn't publish anything by me. They hated me there. But yeah, I might think about writing some nonsense, do an Alan Sokal on them, the Sokal affair. If you don't know about that, Alan Sokal wrote a paper that was just nonsense, something about the quantum physics of existence and binary disposition between architectural millennia. And you know, it made no sense. And this paper, I can't remember the magazine, but quite a respected sort of peer-reviewed paper magazine printed it, and he sort of said, "There you go. That's your post-structural thought for you." So yeah, maybe I'll submit a paper, but I'm going to show it to you. We're going to read it. Now, what I want you to realise is, after this, I'm going to show you what comes out, the product, the fruit of the tree that is social justice in universities. But first of all, I want you to get an idea of the language and the tone, the theme of these people and what they do. So let's have a look. Here we go. Right. Here we go. Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Cultures. Always like yogurt. School of Fine Art, History of Art and Cultural Studies. Here we go. Special issue call for papers. Corpse. Volume 25, issue 1, 2019. So that's coming out soon. January 3rd, 2018. Can you see that? In 1982, in Voice 2, Jacques Derrida wrote, "Today, one often says body with the same degree of credulousness or dogmatism, at best with the same faith as, previously, one used to speak of soul." Okay? That's what they're stepping out from. Against such credulousness and dogmatism, this issue of Parallax invites papers exploring how contemporary critical theory being Frankfurt School, the Marxist project, continuing to this day, how contemporary critical theory can challenge preconceptions on the body and interrogate its limits, particularly in relation to intertwined foldings of desire, gender, race, and sexuality. The usual suspects. Let's just have that again. This issue of Parallax invites papers exploring how contemporary critical theory can challenge preconceptions on the body and interrogate its limits, particularly in relation to intertwined foldings of desire, gender, race, and sexuality. Which is what we need. It's relevant. You struggling to believe me? I wonder why. Parallax. In invoking the French term corpse, rather than its English counterpart, body/bodies, in brackets, we wish to challenge the assumed familiarity of what a body or bodies are and could be. Generally speaking, this gesture aims to suggest that the Derridian problematization of textuality and untranslatability might challenge and reconfigure, separated there, reconfigure, the conventional dichotomy between understandings of the body either as a physical/material or socio-culturally constructed, or as socially culturally constructed, Textuality points to the notion that material embodiments remain open to future interpretations, future translations, open to the event of future readings. Yes, it's true. Things mean different things at different times by different people. Well done. Oh, let's investigate it again. And the mad thing is, and I say mad and far from it, it's actually as sane as you like. This is what they were doing then. That paragraph is not out of place 20 years ago on my foundation course, on my arts course at Leeds Uni. Anywhere there, it's the same old stuff. It hasn't moved forward. The idea of the dialectic and resolving the contradiction and getting new ideas has certainly stalled when it comes to social justice. They're in a spinning vacuum. They're stuck to the edge and they've got nowhere to go. In particular, we aim to enable novel encounters with corpse. This wordplay is all, you'll find it all the way through cultural studies, all the way through social justice, feminism, women's studies, all that. These are idle plays on words. And don't get me wrong, I still have a lot of respect for Derrida and his writings, and the plays on words he uses are actually exceptionally interesting, and the way they translate differently across countries, across nations and languages and times, and the difference between the written word and the spoken word. Martin Heidegger in his seminal, unreadable text, Being and Time, endless plays on words, which you get the idea were necessary. It was part of what he was trying to say, whereas this is pathetic. It's just, oh look, that means that as well. In particular, we aim to enable novel encounters with corpse by emphasizing the problem of uncountability. The French corpse is both plural and singular. The linguistic ambivalence thus raises the problems of undecidability and supplementarity in the process of signification and their theoretical, ethical, and political implications, which Derrida famously explored through notions such as difference, dissemination, or pharmacon. None of which any of these students had bothered studying. They'd have read the introduction or the bit on the back, or they would have, what students loved was a secondary text, where another author would break it down and translate it, going against everything that these thinkers said, just so they could get a grasp on it while they were busy out skateboarding or night clubbing and not doing the work. These weren't intelligent people. They weren't well read. They were well blagged. In addition to Derrida's work, the problematization of corpse unaccountability seeks to encourage interventions, mobilizing the work of thinkers who, alongside Derrida, have interrogated this problem in relation to post-colonial critique and critical race theory, such as blah, blah, and have argued for sexes and sexualities which are not determined by univocal, I thought that was unequivocal, univocal phallocentric logic, blah, 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 or have navigated their interrogations towards the entwining genesis, evolutions and cohabitations of humans and non-humans, blah, blah, blah. You're never getting a paragraph like that talking about medicine, talking about rocket science, talking about anything other than something that simply doesn't need to mean much. We also invite contributions exploring corpse by opening them to its/their own untranslatability. I mean, is that you? Did you hear that sentence and think, whoa, hang on? Or with your life experience, your family, your job, your struggles, your existence, your pains, your pleasures, your desires, your ennui. Did you think, well, I haven't got that, but I'm glad my money's paying for that, because where would we be as a society without people who are doing that? Without people exploring corpse by opening them to its own untranslatability. In this respect, we are interested in the ways in which various intellectual, linguistic, and political traditions engage with this problem, but also in contributions engaging with questions opened through this word's disseminal polysemy. This may include interrogating corpse in relation to divisions and units of bodies associated together or acting in formation towards a common direction, called corpse in English, thus pointing to the problematics of combating bodies and forming alliances. It may also lead to questions related to what has been left behind, the remains, residues, or remainers, or, as it's named in English, corpses, which implies an opening of the problematic of finitude, memory, survival, but also the theorizing corpse in relation to futurity, afterlife, and to the impossibility of new and different lives. We welcome proposals within, but not limited to, questions such as representations of the body. And this is the list of my studies. My 7 years in arts education is just this list. Representations of the body. Different bodies, bodies of difference. sexed bodies, deconstructing sex and sexuality, singular and/or plural embodiments, collective or communal bodies, genres, and genealogies, bodies in combat, translating corpse, technologies of the body, prostheticity and supplementarity, uncountable and unaccountable bodies, remains, bodily traces, pharmacologies of the body. I done a fair amount of that at Leeds Uni, I can tell you. Deconstructive biopolitics. By initiating such explorations of corpse, this issue of Parallax, right, and here we go, this is the role and function of this work. This is where all that money, all that time, all those resources, social resources, this is what they're about, this is what they're fulfilling, ready? This is where they tell you what this is for. By initiating such explorations of corpse, this issue of Parallax seeks to, and here we go, this is the kicker, seeks to intervene in the current scholarship of feminist, queer and post-colonial theory, transgender studies, biomedical humanities, critical science studies, deconstruction, post-humanism, literature and visual art studies. That's what it's going to do. It's going to intervene in the current scholarship of the same old fucking usual suspects. And it just tells you about getting them in, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now, hopefully I'll come back to this next year, especially if my article gets published. But now I'm going to show you a video. Let me just make sure I'm still good. Oh, yeah. So I found this video. This is by a professor. Someone who's paid at the level of professor. She's a doctor. So she's done a degree, a master's degree and a doctorate. All on us. All on our ticket. On our meter. Your hard work pays for this. Now, I'm not saying education shouldn't be paid for. I don't believe education is a right. I think that's bullshit, man. You know, there's no, you know. I'm not saying that education shouldn't be paid for, but fuck me. Should this? Is the question. I'm trying to intervene in the corpse of contemporary cultural studies. So anyway, this woman, she's a doctor of media studies, same lot, same crowd. And this, bearing in mind, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10 years at university. This is where that work goes. This is what it produces. Wicked Women, Witchcraft and Feminism. Let's have a look.
Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Campbell. I'm a professor of media studies at St. Thomas University in Miami, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about some media research I'm doing.
So this is her research. This is she's already got a doctorate. This is her research as a professor.
One of the interesting things I'm looking at now is representations of witchcraft in film and television, and how that relates to feminist theory.
What I want her to say is why. I want her to say why she's doing this. I want her to explain the most important part about this. What is the point? What is the product of this work? How does society benefit? And of course she doesn't, because it goes without saying. To these people it goes without saying. And yet it doesn't. It doesn't speak for itself. It doesn't go without saying. Quite the opposite.
Basically, the idea behind what I'm looking at,
I hate people who say basically. I'm always like, no, you can give me the complex version. I'm not a twit.
Is that the changing representation of witchcraft, which is really powerful women and women's unique forms of power, how
Of course it had to be about how amazing women are.
That's changed over time, and how that change really represents the changing roles of women in society.
Right, there you go. So she made an effort there. So she's going to look at how witchcraft and powerful women as the representations of that. So media and art, media will be, how representations of that have changed. Why? Does anyone know why that's necessary? Why we need to know that? She won't make it clear.
If we look back in the 1960s and early 70s, which was really the sexual revolution.
I mean, when you look back at the 60s and 70s, it was really the sexual revolution. would have thought someone looking at Witchcraft might have gone back to the Middle Ages, but nonetheless, 1960s American television seems a good starting place.
Women were starting to come into power. We see a lot of television and movies with representations of magical women. Two that immediately spring to mind are I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched.
There you go. These are the objects. I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched. That's what she's using to make her absent point.
If we look at these, we see these very powerful women whose power has to be contained by society and masculinity.
No. We see comedies. We see setups and situations created to make us laugh.
In I Dream of Jeannie, it's so obvious. Major Nelson, the icon of the United States, he's a member of NASA. He has this powerful magical woman, and he literally contains her in a bottle.
She's a genie. The feminist blaming the man for that. He contains her. This genie. It's what she is. No, it's his fault. So it's the bloke's fault. The bloke who the story will tell you they're trying to love each other, they're trying to enjoy life. But no, the feminist blames him for being what she is, female.
When we look at Bewitched, what we see is a very powerful and intelligent woman being contained by middle-class culture. It's very important to both Samantha and her husband that she does not use her powers for any kind of domestic ability, doing anything in the house. She must do things like a real American woman.
Yes, but that's the joke, because when she uses her magic, it involves her mother and spells, and it goes weird because most people aren't prepared for spells and magic. It doesn't go on in the rest of the world, so that she's continually getting into trouble with it, so she tries not to do it. This is a weird angle.
Here's a clip that explains what I'm talking about.
I love you.
Hilarious. A good comedy actor is already making you laugh. Look at his boat race.
When I can't give you up.
Darling,
And she is hot AF.
I'll be the best wife a man ever had.
So you're meant to shriek at that. If we're watching that in a cultural studies class, everyone's just gone, because, how dare you want to be a good wife? Oh, what a horrible thing to want. Who'd want a stable family that functions well? The feminists would have been cracking up at these idiots.
I know you would. We're going to have a nice, normal, happy life together and no more...
No, I promise.
Because they both know that it causes them problems. The whole show, the joke of the show is based on that. Is based on the fact that magic causes problems because it's magical, it's weird, it's powerful, and really they just want a normal life.
It's not going to be easy. It's tough enough being married to an advertising man if you're normal, but I mean you're going to have to learn to be a suburban housewife.
I'll learn. You'll see. I'll learn.
Now, you'll have to learn to cook.
Oh, imagine she's got to learn to cook. I mean, he really should do it, being out at work all day because he's an advertising exec. I mean, if she was the advertising exec, he'd need to learn how to cook. That's all right. Different scared shills and availabilities.
And keep house. Mm-hmm. And go to my mother's house for dinner every Friday night.
Darling, it sounds wonderful.
She wants a normal life because she's blessed. She's not blessed. She doesn't like being a fucking witch. Look how much she loves the idea of normality. They're a ridiculous example. Thanks, Professor.
And soon we'll be a normal, happy couple with...
And of course they're building this up because about, I'm sure, a minute after this scene, she turns around, says the wrong word, and 1,000 earthworms come out the bathroom or something. It's a joke.
No problems. Just like everybody else.
Fast forward to modern day, and
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's the evidence. Oh, see what she said. Wow. Thanks, Professor.
we actually see a very different representation of magical women. A very, very popular television series was Charmed, the story of three witch sisters learning how to use their power. Rather than being contained, what we see is focus is on learning. These powers are important and they should be used, but they need to be learned how to use properly. In this clip from one of the first episodes, we see the traditional approach. The father tries to contain and protect his girls from their power.
Oh my God, how dare a father try and protect his children? Evil patriarchal bitch.
I'm here to protect you.
Yeah, right. To protect us from what?
From yourselves. That's why I want that damn book. It's where the power of 3 started, and it's where it must end.
He's worried about them. It's dangerous. It must be hard enough being a witch, but imagine being a young woman witch.
It's part of us. It's part of who we are.
I never wanted you to have those powers in the first place. I battled with your grandmother after your mom died. All I want is what's best for you.
Oh, those traditional roles with fathers wanting what's best for their daughters. Evil.
And in fact, they use their power to save him, and he acknowledges the significance of their power.
Oh, well, that says it all now. Now it makes sense.
I thought you didn't want us to use our magic.
I didn't. Not as long as I still thought of you as my little girls. But you're obviously not anymore.
We're still your little girls. We're just witches.
Oedipal. I'm getting a little bit Oedipal myself.
Yeah. Witches. Who obviously don't need your old man to protect you from anything.
In Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
That's it, is it, Prof? Thanks.
we see all kinds of magical women.
Chinek. Chinek studies. Corpses with Chineks.
Of course, there's Buffy, who uses magic, mystical powers from the ancients to destroy vampires and save the world
So fucking what are you talking about, Professor?
repeatedly. But we also have a witch in the show. We've got Willow, Buffy's friend, who over the course of the show learns how to use her magic powers. In this very humorous clip from the musical, Once More with Feeling, we see Xander acknowledge the power and significance of these witch women.
It could be witches, some evil witches, which is ridiculous because witches, they were persecuted, wicked, good, and love the earth and women power, and I'll be over here.
She was right about it being very humorous.
So what we see is the changing roles of women in American society being represented in the media of American society. If you look at witchcraft and magical powers as a sign of women's powers and their special abilities, we see the focus shifting from containment to learning how to use their powers to help society, to further society, to protect society. Things to think about when you're watching film and television.
And there you go, that's cultural studies for you, that's social justice, that's feminism, that's media studies. That's a woman who shows you a clip from I Dream of Jeannie and fucking Bedazzled, whatever it's called, then a bit of Buffy, and then saying, there you go, that's something. What was that last denouement?
From containment to learning how to use their powers to help society, to further society, to protect society.
Right, and this is the line where she explains why she done all that study, 10 years of all those taxpayers' dollars, all that time, all that effort for this.
Things to think about when you're watching film and television.
There you go. Things to think about when you're watching film and television. Absolutely shocking. I hope you enjoyed that. Tomorrow, if you're watching this now, if you're watching this when it comes out, tomorrow, Thursday, the 9th of March, I'm doing a live stream at 3 o'clock GMT with On the Offensive and Iconoclast. Check it out. It's going to be brilliant. It's like 3 witches. When shall we 3 meet again? Thank you very much to my patrons. If you enjoy this channel, if you enjoy my videos, links in the description to Patreon, Maker Support and PayPal. If you can spare the price of a coffee, $1 a month, it will mean the world to me. Thank you very much, and you know, as usual, here's some ladies. Actually, that's Thursday the 8th. I didn't realise it was gone midnight. Oh, I do apologise anyway. He's a really magic woman.
From Anusa, Niamalok